Hello guys, so in my recent review of the Beelink U55 mini PC I told that, for example, under macOS this little machine runs so much faster than under Windows 10, and I promised that I will be doing a tutorial about installing macOS on the Beelink U55 and thus making it a tiny little Hackintosh. And exactly this is what I will be doing in this tutorial video, so I hope you will enjoy that. Alright, so for this tutorial you will need your Beelink U55 running Windows 10 as a start. And then you will need a USB drive, preferably a USB 2 drive with either 8 or 16 GB of memory. If it's more, it doesn't matter, it just needs to be at least 8 GB. Then you need a working Ethernet connection to your Beelink U55 so you can access the internet, because macOS doesn't support the Wi-Fi module inside this mini PC. And then of course you need a little bit of time. Also, all of the files you need for this tutorial are placed down below in the video description, so make sure to download this package and extract it. And before we start, I want to tell you that I am not into software piracy, so please, if you follow this tutorial and install macOS on your Beelink U55, make sure to purchase a copy of macOS or OS X on the Apple website. The old versions are still available for purchase. It's priced at 22 euros here in Europe, and then you will have a valid license and can continue. So to start all of this, we need to insert our USB drive that we can erase in this process into the Beelink U55, which I will do right now. Afterwards, you extract the package that you downloaded from the link in the video description, and then you will find these files. You will find a folder called Clover, you will find a folder called Setup Tools, and you will find the BD utility, which is for the boot disk utility, which will create your installation stick for macOS. So just open up this tool, confirm the message, and then you will see this. And as you can see, it displays my USB stick, and the first thing we need to do is to erase it. So I simply click on Format, click OK, and then wait until the process has finished. Be in mind that this will delete all of the files on the USB stick, so back up all of it in case you need the files that are on there. So once the tool displays the all done message here, we can continue. You next click on the DL Center button. And here you click the update button once, and then it will retrieve a list of the available macOS recovery images from the Apple servers. Simply wait for this to be finished, and once it's done, you will have your drop-down list filled here, and there you can select the recovery version you want to use, and the latest one always is called just macOS, so select this. In this case it's macOS Mojave, and it's the latest beta version actually, which right now is the 10.14.4 beta 6. So I select this, and then I click on the DL button, and it will download the image to the folder the boot disk utility is located in. This will take a while depending on your internet connection, so just be a little patient until it's finished. So as you can see, the download and extraction process has been completed now, and I will get the summary information window, so I click OK. And as you can see, we have this 4.hfs file here now, which is the recovery image. So to get this onto the USB stick, I click on this little plus sign here, and then we'll see two partitions. One smaller 200 megabyte partition and one larger 14.44 GB partition. This size can vary depending on the size of your USB stick, but make sure to highlight the larger partition, the larger second partition on your stick. Next, you click on the Restore button, and then it will ask you to select the file you want to restore from, and that's of course the image we just generated, the 4.hfs. I select this, then click on Open, and it will start after confirming this message to transfer this image onto the USB drive. This again will take a couple of minutes, so just wait for it to complete, and then you will be good to go. So now the process has completed, all the files have been transferred to the USB stick, and thus the installation drive has been created. So now we can close the boot disk utility. So next we need to transfer the Clover configuration, which is the bootloader configuration necessary to run macOS on the Beelink U55 onto this disk. So for that you select this Clover folder from the Hackintosh package that you downloaded previously, that also included the BD utility. So you just copy this Clover folder, and then you go to your PC and find your USB stick, which right now has two partitions, this, and we need this Clover partition. Double click on it, and inside of there you'll find the EFI folder. Double click on it, and here we'll see a Clover folder again, and here we just paste the previously copied Clover folder. And then if it's asking us to overwrite the files that are already on there, we just say yes, replace the files in the destination. And once this is done, you are ready to go and we can start the installation process. But before we are doing that, we need to go into the BIOS of the Beelink U55. So to get into the UEFI BIOS of the Beelink U55, open up your Start menu, then click on the Power Off button. And here you see the entry Restart. Just put your mouse over it and don't click yet. Then hold down the Shift key and then click on Restart while holding down the Shift key. Then it will tell you to wait. And then you will see this menu. Here you click on Troubleshoot. And then you click on Advanced Options. And here you click on the UEFI firmware settings. And then you click on Restart. So now the machine reboots and will bring us right into the UEFI or BIOS setup menu. So in the BIOS/UEFI setup menu, you go to Save and Exit and check if your USB drive is listed there under Boot Override, which in my case is the case. Here we see the USB stick, Kingston Data Traveler, so all is fine. So once this is the case, you go to Boot, and here you change the boot priorities. You remove essentially the hard drive entry and replace it with your USB stick, and you disable all of the remaining entries here. So this has to look like that. Boot option 1 USB stick and the remaining stuff disable, and then under boot option priorities you also set this to your USB stick under number 1, and the remaining options need to be disabled as well. So there you go. This is how it has to look like. And once this is finished, we can go to Save and Exit and select Save Changes and Reset, hit Enter, then Yes, and then it will boot from the installation stick. And this is where you will see the Clover boot loader, which essentially translates between the PC hardware and macOS to be able to boot this operating system. So you will most likely see this boot entry, this boot entry. You won't see these two, and this boot entry, as well as this boot entry. So these are macOS boot entries that are already installed on my internal SSD because I already installed macOS, so simply ignore this. For the installation process, you need to select your USB drive, which is this one. This also has the USB icon on it, and it's called Boot macOS Install from macOS Base System. So simply select this, hit the Enter button, and then the macOS recovery system will start. This will take a short while. And as you can see, it boots in verbose boot mode, so we can see if something bad happens, if some error occurs, it will display this. So this is just for general information purposes. You could also boot it without verbose boot, but to install macOS on PC hardware, it's always handy to have the verbose boot enabled. So after a moment, you will see this little dialog here to select the language. Simply choose your language you want to use. I will go with English for now and click this little arrow down here. And then it will take a short while and the recovery system will load up. So there you go, this is the recovery system, and here you simply have to go into the disk utility to set up the SSDs or the SSD. So to see your actual SSDs, right now it's just displaying partitions, we need to click on View and then Show all devices. And as you can see, I have two SSDs inside of here, one 2.5-inch SSD and the stock M2 drive. So the stock M2 drive has Windows on it and I want to dual boot, so I will install onto the 2.5-inch SSD I have built inside. You can also install, of course, onto the M.2 SSD, but bear in mind that you need two SSDs for dual boot. So if you want to keep Windows, you need to insert a second SSD and install macOS on this one. If you want to go for single boot, just erase this main SSD, the M.2 SSD. So I select the SSD I want to install on, which is my 2.5-inch SSD. And then I click on the erase button here on top. And here I need to select the partition type, which is APFS, which is what macOS uses by default these days. And then I need to make sure that the scheme down here is the GUID partition map, not the master boot record and also not the Apple partition map. GUID partition map is the right one, and this is important. And then I can give a name for the partition, which in this case I'm just calling Hackintosh SSD. And then I will click on the erase button, which will delete all of the files on the SSD drive. This again will take a couple of seconds to minutes depending on your SSD. So there you go, now the SSD is formatted and all the partitions have been created, so I can click on Done. And then I can already close this disk utility again. And now we click on Reinstall macOS and then on the little Continue button down there. And now it will load the macOS setup. So there we go. Now we need to click on Continue. Then it will ask us to accept the license agreement, which of course we have to do in order to install the operating system. So there you go. Just click on Agree and then on Agree again. And now we need to select the partition we just created, which is Hackintosh SSD. And now I click on Install and the whole thing starts. So what this is doing now is to download the actual macOS from the Apple servers, because we don't have a full install stick. This is just a recovery stick. So it's downloading everything from the Apple servers, and depending on your internet connection, this can take a couple of minutes or even hours if it's slow. So I need to wait about 37 minutes and then it will automatically reboot. And I will do a cut now and then I will tell you how to proceed. Alright, so now the first installation step has finished and we are back in the Clover bootloader. But now we need to start from the internal SSD and not from the recovery stick anymore. So we switch to this entry where it says boot macOS install from Hackintosh SSD. Simply select it and hit enter. And then macOS will start booting from the internal 2.5-inch SSD that all the installation files previously were downloaded to. So this will again take a little while and then the installation process will continue. And please note that it could happen that this machine restarts before it actually starts the second installation process. So this is normal, this is nothing to be worried about. So let's just see what happens. So here is the setup again. And here we have the sudden reboot. So as I said, nothing to worry about, perfectly normal. Just select the previous boot entry again once it reboots. So here we are back in Clover, and as you can see, the previously selected boot entry is selected again. So I just need to hit enter. And now I need to wait for it to boot again, and then it will eventually continue with the setup. And now we are back in the setup, and it now continues the installation process without a reboot. So now we just need to wait until this is finished. Then it will reboot again, and then we will continue with the setup of the operating system. And here we go, the final reboot has occurred. And now we can boot macOS for the very first time with the finished installation. As you can see, the name of the boot drive changed to boot macOS from Hackintosh SSD, and I just hit enter on that. But of course, we still need the USB drive for booting, so don't remove this. The reason for this is that we don't have a bootloader installed right now. macOS doesn't come with a bootloader because Macs do have the bootloader embedded into the UEFI firmware or BIOS. So we need to first install the Clover bootloader on the internal SSD, then copy over our Clover configuration that we used for installation from the stick to the SSD, and then we can boot without the boot stick. But first let's wait until macOS has booted up for the very first time, and then the setup process of the OS will start. So here we are in the macOS setup assistant, and we have to select our language again. So let's go for the United States of America. Select the language and then click continue. Now it will prompt us to select a keyboard layout, and since I live in Germany, I have a German keyboard, so I'm going to select this. Next, click continue. So next we click on continue again. No, we don't want to transfer any information now. Click continue. Now your Apple ID will be set up later on. This can't be done right now because we are still missing a serial number for that. So we click on set up later. Skip. Then we need to accept the terms and conditions. Just click on agree and then on agree again. And now we can set up our account. So I will just enter my first name here. The account name will be set automatically. Of course, you can change this. This will also be the name of your home folder. And then I need to enter a password for the system. And then I click to continue. So now it's asking us to do the express setup, and yes, we can indeed do that. So just click on continue here. And now it will ask us to choose the look of the OS. You can either go for the classic light look or the new dark mode, which was introduced in Mojave. I will go for the light mode. So let's continue after we made our selection. And now it is doing the final steps of the setup. We just need to wait for this to finish, and then the desktop will load. Now we can do the final setup of our keyboard, so just click continue. It will ask us to press this highlighted button, which I am doing now. And there we go, ISO European, that's correct for my keyboard. I click done, and there we go. This is the macOS desktop on the Beelink U55. Now we need to finish the installation by installing the bootloader. And for this, please copy your files, your Hackintosh installation package for the Beelink U55 onto a USB stick so you can access it right here in macOS. So now I have inserted the USB stick with my files and it appeared here. I double click on the icon of the stick and then I will see the files on this stick, and here is the Hackintosh package with all the tools we need. And here first you go into the Setup Tools folder and you will see 3 apps. First, the Clover Configurator, which is a configuration tool for the Clover bootloader. Then we have the HW Monitor, which displays sensor information like CPU temperature. And we have the Kext Updater, which is kind of a driver updater tool. It keeps the typical Hackintosh kexts up to date. Kexts are kernel extensions, those are the drivers for macOS. So of course, inside our Clover configuration, we have some specific kext files for this machine. And if you want to update them, you can do this with this tool. So I just highlight all of these apps and then I drag them right here into applications to install them. So that's how you install most of the apps in macOS. It's really that simple. Just drag them in applications and you are done. If you want to uninstall them, drag them onto the recycle binary and they are deleted or uninstalled. So next we need to open the Clover configurator by double-clicking on the icon. And this is how it will look like for you. And it might look a bit complicated, but in fact it isn't, and you don't need all of the options. So what you first want to do is to click on install/update Clover. So here we are downloading the latest installation package for the Clover bootloader. To do this, just click the Check Now button on the lower right corner, and then it will look for the latest version. And as you see, we have the latest stable revision 4895, and to download it, I simply click on the download button. This can again take a short while. And once the download has finished, the setup will automatically start, as you can see. I just need to click on Continue, again on Continue, and again on Continue. And now we need to make sure it's installing to the right location. We need to install it onto our SSD, which is the Hackintosh SSD. So I need to select this, click on Continue. And now I need to select Customize and set a check mark here for the Clover for UEFI booting only, because our mini PC is booting in UEFI mode, not in classic BIOS or CSM mode. Compatibility support module is CSM. So we simply set the checkbox here, and we don't need to set any other check marks because we are replacing the default configuration which is generated here anyhow. So just click on Install, and then it will ask you for your macOS password. So simply enter it, and then Clover will be installed onto the SSD. So if it gives you this warning, the installation failed, don't care about it. This sometimes happens, but it has nothing to say. Just close, and then you switch to Mount EFI. And as you can see, our EFI partition of the macOS SSD we installed the operating system on is already mounted because we just installed Clover. Of course, it does mount it automatically during the installation process. So all I need to do here is to click on Open Partition, and it will open the EFI partition of our SSD. And here we find the EFI folder. As you can see, there is now a Clover folder, so installation did succeed, it didn't fail as it said. So now we need to replace this Clover folder with the Clover configuration that we used for installing macOS in order to be able to boot without the installation stick we created. So I just go back into my Hackintosh package, again highlight the Clover folder, click on Copy Clover, and then I go back to my EFI partition, and here I paste the Clover folder. And then it will ask me to, if I want to replace the files or merge them. I want, of course, to replace all files. So we have the full configuration I created for the Beelink U55 inside of there. So now I copied all the files inside of there, and we can unmount the EFI partition again. So let me just do this. We just need to go back into our Clover configurator, and here we have the button Unmount Partition. Just click on that and the partition is unmounted. Now we can close the Clover configurator, and now I go back to the desktop, and on the desktop I right click onto my macOS installation stick, which has two partitions as you can see, but I just need to select one, right click on it and click on Eject. Then it will ask me if I want to eject all volumes on this drive, which I want to do, eject all. And now I can remove the boot stick, the install stick, from my little computer, from the Beelink U55. So now we can reboot macOS again. For this, simply click on the Apple logo and click on Restart. Just remove this checkbox to not open all the windows that are opened right now again. This is how it looks like. So just remove this and click on Restart. And now when the mini PC restarts, you need to hit the delete key repeatedly until you are in the BIOS again, because we need to change our boot order again. As you remember, we have set the USB stick for booting, and now we will change the boot order to the internal hard drive. So to do that, we simply select here under boot option priorities the UEFI OS Intenso SSD where I installed macOS from. If you installed it on your M.2 SSD, on your internal one, you need to select this one. It will also say UEFI-OS then. I have installed Windows on there, you remember that, so this is why it says Windows Boot Manager. But I want the UEFI-OS as my main boot drive and nothing else. So boot option 2 needs to be disabled, and this can be disabled as well if it doesn't say UEFI-OS in there. Sometimes it does for some reason. There seems to be some little bug with this BIOS there. So once it looks like this, you can go to save and exit, save changes and reset, confirm, and it will reboot, and then Clover should load again, but this time from the internal SSD. So there you go. And now we have the Clover boot menu again, and we can boot Windows or macOS or the macOS system recovery. We of course want to boot macOS, so select boot macOS from Hackintosh SSD, hit enter, and it will boot up again. So now macOS has booted up again, and next we need to set up our serial numbers and all that stuff. So we again open up the Clover configurator. By the way, if you want this on a specific position in your dock, you can simply drag the icon and place it somewhere here and it will stay there. So let's just place it here. And let me zoom in a little so you can read what's going on my screen. And there we go. So what we need to do is to mount the EFI partition again of the SSD we installed macOS from. So we click on Mount EFI. Here we'll see the two SSDs inside the Beelink U55. Of course, we select the Intenso I installed macOS on and click on Mount Partition. It will again ask you for your system password. Just enter it, and then we can open the partition. Whoopsie-doo, what happened? It ejected again. Let's try this again. There we go. So now we can open up the EFI partition. Then we go into EFI, into Clover, and here you see the whole Clover configuration. And what we need to edit here is the config.plist. plist means parameter list, and those are configuration files for macOS. And of course also the Clover bootloader, so we right click on this and say open with Clover configurator. And this is what the Clover configuration, the main configuration file looks like. Now you can ignore all of that stuff, but please go to boot, and here you see under boot arguments the -v entry. Select this and hit the minus. This will cause the system not to boot up in text mode anymore, but instead show the Apple logo with the progress bar that we are used to from regular Macs. So there we go. And next we need to set up our serial numbers. So here you see fill this, fill this, fill this. All this needs to be filled. So we click on serial number generate new, and it will automatically generate a new serial number as well as a board serial number. And now the important step is to check if the serial number already exists by going to the Apple support website and check the warranty coverage. So just click on this check coverage button. Then it will open up the browser and the Apple support website. Let me just get this a little smaller. There we go. And now we need to enter the captcha code, which I think means 6K VQW. And now you see we are sorry, but this serial number isn't valid, and this means that it doesn't exist and we can use it. If you use a serial number that already exists, this can cause trouble because Apple might lock down your Apple ID, and it can also cause trouble with the person the serial number belongs to. So Apple does tolerate Hackintosh users. They really do, but they won't tolerate you screwing around with existing serial numbers. So this is really important. Don't use existing serial numbers, please. Create your own, check coverage, and if it's red, everything is okay. So now we can close this again. And what we are doing now is to double click onto the serial number and copy it. And now we count 5 digits or letters from the end of this board serial number. 1, 2, 3, 4, U55. And then we are going to delete all of the remaining stuff and paste the serial number inside of there. This will help with getting iMessage and FaceTime to work on a Hackintosh if you do this. Then sometimes it also doesn't hurt to set this trust check mark here. You don't need to do that, but if you have issues with FaceTime and iMessage, you might want to try that. And then we also need to create a SMUUID for the hardware. Just click on Generate New and you will be fine. And next we also need to enter the system parameters here. And there we need to get the UUID from the system. And that's about it. That's all the configuration you need to change in the Clover config template I created. To save all of this, simply hit Command S or Windows S on a normal PC keyboard. Or you can also go to the menu bar up here, click on File and Save. And then you can close this. If it throws this message at you, you can just click on OK, that's fine. And now we can reboot again to get the serial numbers and UUIDs applied to our OS. So simply click on Restart and again on Restart and wait until it has rebooted. And as you can see, it now boots like a real Mac does, with the Apple logo and the progress bar. So now I can log into my account again. And now you might notice that the time set in the system is wrong. And you might also want to change your language. So for that you go into the settings, into the system settings, which is this little icon down there with the gear. Let me zoom in again so you can see something. There we go. So to set the time, you simply go to Date and Time, and then you unlock the Preference panel, enter your password, and then you select your preferred time zone, which in my case, of course, is Germany. And then you can also select the appropriate time server, which in my case is Apple Europe, and then the time will be correctly set. And to change your system language, you simply go to Language and Region. And here you hit the plus sign. Select the language you want to use, click on Add, and then select Use as Primary. And then you have to reboot one time and your preferred language will be set. And that's about it. Finally, if you want to add your Apple account, you can click to iCloud here. And then enter your Apple ID credentials and sign in and use the App Store and all that stuff, but I won't show that now because that's kind of self-explanatory. So yeah, that's about installing macOS on the Beelink U55. So now you might ask the question, why go through all this trouble and install macOS on the Beelink U55? And the reason for that, one is because it's possible and it's a lot of fun to do, and if you like macOS better than Windows, it's kind of the best option you can get with the Beelink U55. But the second and most important reason is performance. If you watched the video review, you have seen that the Windows UI gets quite slow and unresponsive once you have a couple of applications opened and all the animations do stutter and all that stuff. So it's not that much fun to use it. It's possible, but really performance could be much better. And macOS is totally different from that. It runs so much more efficient than Windows that even on the rather weak hardware of the Beelink U55, it runs just remarkably well. Just look at this. I drag around Windows and this is totally smooth. I scroll here in the application list, again, totally smooth. I can switch views here and again, it's totally smooth, no issues whatsoever. And now look at this. I open up Mission Control. And despite having opened a lot of apps, there is not a single sign of stutter. Sometimes there might be short frame drops, but overall it runs extremely smooth and tons faster than Windows 10 does. And let me just drag some windows around here. And as you can see again, no stutter. So let me go into full screen with some of the apps. So let's, for example, put the calendar into full screen. Let's put the Safari web browser into full screen, and also let's put the Apple Maps application into full screen. And now let me switch between the desktops I just created. As you can see, even this is totally smooth at 1440p. That's quite a high resolution for such a weak mini PC, yet it handles it with no issues whatsoever. Really nice. Applications are very responsive, no problems. I can open up menus without any lag or delay. I can search for menu options. As you can see, again, no delay. Let's go to Safari and open up a website, chinamobilemac.de. Let's open up another website, for example, youtube.com. What else do we have? Wikipedia maybe, TripAdvisor. So now we have 4 rather large sites opened up. Let's wait for them all to load. Wikipedia is already loaded here. Let's go to the main page. Here is YouTube, and here is China Mobile Mac. And as you can see, totally smooth scrolling. Let's open up a large article, for example, the Xiaomi Mi 9 review, and it pops just up. And I can scroll through the post in an extremely smooth way. This is not possible on Windows 10. It does stutter. Also, the slideshow, which is based on JavaScript, does work totally smooth, no issues at all. Let's switch between tabs. Here's YouTube. Works just as smooth, even with the video preview being played here. There can be some short hangs, but nothing dramatic. Wikipedia, again, totally smooth. TripAdvisor is totally smooth again, just during loading a quick stutter, but then it runs just totally smooth, as you can see. So yeah, that's a really great performance. Let's open up Mission Control again. No issues at all. Let's switch between desktops. No issues. Let's use Apple Maps. As you can see, I can move around the map totally smooth. Zoom in a bit. And again, totally smooth, even when it loads all the information. So that's working just great. Let's switch to satellite view here. No issues at all. So for such a tiny and cheap mini PC, that's quite remarkable in my opinion. And really everything on the Beelink U55 works except for the internal microSD card reader and the Intel Wi-Fi, which is always incompatible with macOS. You can't use Intel Wi-Fi cards there, but everything else works. Graphics acceleration, audio works, USB works along USB 3. The Ethernet jack works, dual HDMI works, HDMI audio output works, Bluetooth works, standby works, PowerNap works. So it's basically a real Mac Mini, and that's quite interesting. So I think that's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon with more of this stuff. Bye!